Listen to me carefully, because what I'm about to tell you might be the most dangerous truth you've ever heard. There is a sentence you can say when someone uses your past against you. A sentence so powerful, so calm, so brutal in its confidence, that it will instantly destroy their control over you. No shouting, no arguing, no explaining, just one line, and suddenly they realize they can't manipulate you anymore. And that's exactly why most people will never say it. Because most people are still trapped, not trapped by their past, but trapped by the shame of it. Trapped by the fear of being judged, trapped by the need to be understood by people who don't even respect them. And if you've ever had someone throw your mistakes in your face, if you've ever had someone remind you of what you did years ago just to make you feel small today, then you already know how it feels. It feels like your past becomes a chain around your neck, like no matter how much you grow, they refuse to see the new you. They only want to keep you stuck in the old version. But here's the truth they don't want you to realize. The moment you respond the right way, your past stops being your weakness and becomes your weapon. And once you understand what I'm about to share, you will never feel embarrassed again. You will never defend yourself again. You will never beg for validation again. So stay with me until the end, because the final line of this video will change the way you handle disrespect forever. Most people think when someone brings up their past, it's because that person is trying to expose the truth. But that's not what's happening, not usually. What's happening is far more psychological than it is factual, because the moment someone reaches into your past to attack you, it's rarely about what you did. It's about what they're losing, and what they're losing is control. Think about it. If someone truly wanted to help you grow, they wouldn't throw your mistakes in your face like a weapon. They would speak to you like a human being. They would ask questions. They would try to understand. They would look at the person you are now and say, "How did you get here?" But when someone uses your past against you, they're not trying to understand you. They're trying to shrink you. Because control doesn't always look like domination. Sometimes it looks like emotional leverage. It looks like reminding you of the worst thing you've ever done, so you never feel confident enough to stand tall again. It looks like taking your weakest chapter and turning it into your permanent identity. And the reason they do that is because they're afraid of the version of you that is starting to rise. There is something deeply uncomfortable for certain people when you stop being ashamed of yourself, because shame is one of the easiest ways to manipulate someone. If I can make you feel guilty, I can make you apologize even when you did nothing wrong. If I can make you feel embarrassed, I can make you stay quiet when you should speak. If I can make you feel unworthy, I can keep you grateful for scraps. And if I can keep you grateful for scraps, I can keep you under control. That's why the past becomes their favorite tool. And the more you improve, the more they bring it up. This is something people don't realize. The attacks don't increase when you fail. They increase when you grow. Because growth threatens the social order of your relationships. It threatens the old dynamics. It threatens the way people used to treat you. It threatens the way they used to feel superior. And some people would rather keep you broken than watch you become powerful. So they reach for the only version of you that they can defeat. The old you, the version that didn't know better, the version that tolerated disrespect, the version that didn't have boundaries, the version that was insecure and emotional and easy to provoke, because they know if they can pull you back into that identity, they can win again. They can get you reacting again. They can get you defending yourself again. They can get you explaining yourself again. And once you start explaining, you're no longer leading the conversation. You're following it. You're no longer in control. You're trying to prove something to someone who already decided not to respect you. That is the trap. And the trap is not about your past. The trap is about your emotional reaction to your past. Because they want you to feel that familiar sting. They want you to feel that old shame. They want you to feel that internal panic that says, what if they're right? What if I really am still that person? They want you to doubt yourself. They want you to question your growth. They want you to shrink your confidence down to the size they can handle. That's why they bring it up in moments when you're doing well. Notice the timing. They don't bring up your past when you're already suffering. They bring it up when you're happy, when you're confident, when you're building something, when you're finally walking with your head high, when you're finally not asking for permission to exist, that's when they start reminding you of old mistakes. That's when they start bringing up stories. That's when they start saying things like, don't act like you're perfect, or I know the real you. What they're really saying is, I'm uncomfortable with the new you. And here's what you have to understand. People who are at peace with themselves do not feel the need to weaponize someone else's history. They don't need to. They don't gain anything from it. They're not threatened by your growth. They're not competing with you. They're not trying to keep you small. But insecure people are different. Insecure people don't want you to grow beyond them. They don't want you to become emotionally stable, because then you won't need their approval. They don't want you to become confident, because then you won't tolerate their disrespect. They don't want you to become disciplined, because then you won't join them in their excuses. They don't want you to heal, because healed people are harder to manipulate. So what do? They use your past as a leash. They use it to pull you back into the identity they're comfortable with. They use it to remind you of your lowest moments, because they need you to believe you're still capable of being that weak again. They need you to believe you're still beneath them. They need you to believe you're still unworthy of respect. And it's subtle too. It doesn't always come as an insult. Sometimes it comes as sarcasm. Sometimes it comes as a joke. Sometimes it comes as I'm just being honest. Sometimes it comes as I'm only saying this because I care. But pay attention to one thing. If it's said to help you, it will be said with compassion. If it's said to control you, it will be said with humiliation. And the moment you feel humiliated, you need to understand what's really happening. You are being emotionally cornered, because if you feel ashamed, you become predictable. You become easy to manipulate. You become easy to silence. You become easy to push around. Shame makes you second guess your instincts. Shame makes you question your right to set boundaries. Shame makes you accept treatment you should never accept. And that is why they love using the past. Because the past is permanent, but your emotions are flexible. They can't change what happened, but they can change how you feel about it. And if they can change how you feel about it, they can change how you behave. And if they can change how you behave, they can regain control. This is why some people keep bringing up things you already apologized for, things you already corrected, things you already paid for, things you already grew from, because they're not interested in closure. They're interested in leverage. And leverage is a dangerous thing to give someone. That's why you have to stop responding like you're on trial, because you're not. You are not in court. You are not standing before a judge. You are not required to defend yourself every time someone brings up your history. The only reason you feel like you need to defend yourself is because you still believe your past is something you must hide. But once you accept your past, it becomes useless to your enemies. It becomes powerless. And that's the turning point. Because when someone says, I remember what you did, and you don't flinch, you don't panic, you don't get emotional, you don't start begging them to understand, something happens. The dynamic changes. The power shifts. They realize they can't control you with shame anymore. And that's when they either respect you or they reveal their true intentions. So if someone keeps using your past against you, don't immediately assume you're being attacked because you're guilty. Sometimes you're being attacked because you're growing. Sometimes you're being attacked because you're becoming unrecognizable. Sometimes you're being attacked because they can feel you slipping out of their hands. And the truth is, they're not afraid of your past. They're afraid of your future. Because your future is the part they can't control. Your future is the part where you finally move on. Your future is the part where you stop explaining yourself. Your future is the part where you stop seeking validation. Your future is the part where you stop tolerating disrespect. And once you step into that future, their influence dies. So remember this. If someone is obsessed with your past, it's usually because they have no power over who you are becoming. And that should tell you everything, because the past is where people go, and they can't compete with your present. And they can't stand the idea that your future might be greater than their control. So the next time they bring it up, don't get dragged into the old story. Look at them calmly and remember this simple truth. If they need your past to win an argument, it means they already lost the moment you started evolving. Here's what most people get wrong about their past. They treat it like a scar they need to hide. They treat it like evidence against them, like a permanent stain on their character. And because of that, they walk through life with this quiet fear in the back of their mind that says, what if someone finds out who I used to be? But that fear is not weakness, it's misunderstanding. Because your past is not a weapon unless you hand someone the handle. And the reason people can hurt you with your past is not because your past is too ugly. It's because you still believe it disqualifies you. That belief is the real prison. See, psychologically, shame is one of the most powerful emotional forces in the human mind. Shame doesn't just say, I did something bad. Shame says, I am bad. And that difference is everything. Guilt can be corrected. Shame becomes identity. Guilt pushes you toward change. Shame convinces you that change is pointless. That's why so many people stay stuck, not because they don't have potential, but because they keep viewing their past like a verdict instead of a chapter. They keep reliving old mistakes like those mistakes are still happening. They keep punishing themselves long after life has moved on. They keep acting like their worst day is their permanent label. But mature people don't live key that. Mature people understand something that insecure people never will. Your past is not something you deny. It's something you integrate. It becomes part of your story, part of your character, part of your wisdom. It becomes the very thing that gives your words weight. Because a person who has never struggled can talk, but their words are light. A person who has been through it, survived it, learned from it, and came back stronger, speaks with authority. That's why your past is not your weakness. It's your credibility. And when you understand that, everything changes, because then you stop speaking about your past like you're confessing. You start speaking about your past like you're explaining, like you're teaching, like you're showing proof of your transformation. You stop looking down when you mention it. You look straight ahead. And people feel that shift. They feel when someone has accepted their journey. They feel when someone has stopped running from their own story. Because the truth is, everybody has a past. The only difference is not everybody has the courage to face it. Not everybody has the courage to admit they were wrong. Not everybody has the humility to change. Not everybody has the discipline to rebuild their life after they messed it up. So when someone tries to use your past against you, the first thing you must realize is this: the fact that you have a past doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It makes you real. It makes you someone who has lived, learned, failed, and still kept going. And that is rare. Most people don't recover from their past. They decorate it. They hide it. They pretend it didn't happen. They create a fake image of perfection because they think perfection earns respect. But the truth is, perfection doesn't earn respect. It earns suspicion. Because deep down, people don't trust perfect. They trust honest. They trust someone who can say, yes, I made mistakes and I grew. That sentence alone is more powerful than any attempt to appear flawless. Now, here's the part that most people are not ready to hear. Your past becomes dangerous only when you refuse to learn from it. If you repeat the same patterns, the same mistakes, the same toxic behaviors, then yes, your past becomes evidence of who you are. But if you faced it, if you learned, if you changed, if you built new habits, if you corrected your behavior, then your past becomes proof that you are capable of transformation. And that's the kind of proof no one can argue with. Because growth is undeniable. Growth is visible. Growth is felt. It shows in how you speak. It shows in how you respond. It shows in how you handle conflict. It shows in how you control your emotions. It shows in the fact that you don't need to scream to be respected. It shows in the fact that you don't need to explain yourself to everyone. And it shows in the fact that you can admit your past without collapsing under its weight. That's real strength. And there's something philosophical about this that I want you to think about. A person who tries to shame you for your past is essentially trying to freeze you in time. They want you to stay trapped in the worst version of yourself because it makes them feel safer. It makes them feel superior. It makes them feel like they can define you. but no human being is meant to be defined by a single moment. No one is meant to be permanently judged by one decision, one mistake, one season of life. Life is dynamic. People evolve, people break, people rebuild, people learn, people grow. And if someone can't accept that you've grown, that says more about their mindset than your character, because some people don't understand growth. They only understand labels. They want the world to be simple. They want to put you in a box. They want to say, you are this kind of person. Because if they can label you, they can dismiss you. But you are not a label. You are a process. You are a journey. And the past is simply part of that journey. So when someone brings up what you used to be, you don't panic. You don't go into defense mode. You don't get emotional. You don't argue like you're fighting for your reputation. You calmly acknowledge reality, because acknowledgement is power. Denial is weakness. When you deny your past, you signal insecurity. When you hide your past, you signal shame. But when you own your past, you signal something else entirely. You signal self-respect. You signal maturity. You signal emotional stability. And nothing intimidates a manipulative person more than someone who is emotionally stable, because an emotionally stable person cannot be controlled with guilt. An emotionally stable person cannot be controlled with shame. An emotionally stable person cannot be controlled with fear. That's why owning your past is so powerful. And here's another truth. People who use your past against you are often projecting their own unresolved guilt. They're uncomfortable because they see in you something they don't have. They see accountability. They see growth. They see the courage to face yourself, and it makes them feel exposed because they know they haven't done the same work. So instead of healing, they criticize instead of evolving. They attack. Instead of improving, they shame, because it's easier to point at your old mistakes than to confront their current ones. But you don't need to fight them. You don't need to convince them. You don't need to prove anything. You simply need to stand in the truth, and the truth is this: your past is not a weapon against you. It is evidence that you survived something that could have destroyed you. It is evidence that you learned the hard way. It is evidence that you've earned wisdom through pain, and that kind of wisdom is expensive. You paid for it with tears. You paid for it with regret. You paid for it with sleepless nights. You paid for it with consequences. You paid for it with humility. So why would you allow someone else to use what you paid for as if it's their weapon? It doesn't belong to them. Your past belongs to you. And if someone brings it up, you don't get offended. You don't collapse. You don't shrink. You don't try to rewrite history. You simply say calmly, with full ownership, yes, that happened. And I learned from it. Because the moment you stop being ashamed of your past, you take away their ammunition. You take away their power. You take away their ability to control the conversation. And the best part is, you don't even have to be arrogant about it. You don't have to be loud. You don't have to act like you're better than anyone. You just have to be grounded. Because grounded people don't fear the truth. They accept it. And ACC, acceptance is not weakness. Acceptance is the highest form of strength. So let them talk about who you used to be. Let them bring up the old version. Let them repeat stories like they're stuck in time. Because while they're obsessed with your past, you're focused on your future. And that's the difference between a person who is evolving and a person who is stuck. Your past is not your shame. Your past is your foundation. And anyone who tries to shame you for it is only proving they've never had the courage to rebuild themselves. So remember this: your past doesn't disqualify you. It prepares you. And the moment you own it completely, it stops being your burden and becomes your power. Here is where most people lose. Not because their argument is weak, not because they don't have the facts, and not because they don't have the truth. They lose because the moment someone brings up their past, they react emotionally. And the reaction is what gives the other person power. This is something you need to understand if you want to become mentally unshakable. In any conflict, the person who controls their emotions controls the outcome. Not always because they are morally right, but because emotional control gives you clarity. and clarity gives you authority. When you stay calm, you can think. When you stay calm, you can choose your words. When you stay calm, you can decide whether the conversation is even worth having. But when you become defensive, you lose all of that. Because defensiveness is not just a reaction. Defensiveness is a signal. It signals that the other person found a weak spot. It signals that they hit something unresolved inside you. It signals that you still feel shame about what they mentioned. And the moment they see that signal, they know exactly where to keep pressing. That's why the worst thing you can do when someone uses your past against you is to start explaining yourself. Explaining feels like strength, but it's usually surrender, because the more you explain, the more you communicate that you need their approval. The more you talk, the more you give them control of the conversation. The more you defend, the more you place them in the position of judge. And the moment you treat someone like a judge, you automatically become the accused. And that is a losing position. You have to understand something psychologically. When someone attacks you with your past, they are not inviting discussion. They are inviting submission. They want you to scramble. They want you to justify. They want you to beg. They want you to say, please understand, I'm not that person anymore. Because that moment, that emotional pleading gives them exactly what they want. Power, and people who use your past against you are almost always addicted to power. They may hide it behind sarcasm, behind honesty, behind I'm just saying, but the goal is always the same. They want to destabilize you. They want to knock you off your center. They want to provoke you into proving yourself. And once you start proving yourself, you've already lost. This is why calmness is not just emotional maturity. Calmness is strategy. Calmness is psychological dominance. Calmness is how you communicate without saying a word that you are not easily controlled. Calmness is how you show that you are not trapped in your past and you are not afraid of your saint. Ori. Now let's talk about what calmness actually looks like in that moment. It does not mean you pretend you don't care. It does not mean you act cold. It does not mean you suppress your emotions and explode later. Calmness means you respond with intention, not impulse, and that is rare. Most people respond impulsively because their ego feels attacked, their identity feels attacked, their reputation feels threatened. So they rush to defend themselves. They raise their voice. They start listing reasons. They start giving background information. They start telling the whole story, hoping that if they explain enough, the other person will finally understand. But people who are committed to misunderstanding you will never be satisfied with your explanation because their goal is not understanding. Their goal is control. So your best move is not to explain. Your best move is to respond with one simple truth and then stop talking. Because short responses are powerful responses. Short responses show emotional discipline. Short responses show confidence. Short responses communicate that you do not need to convince anyone of who you are. And that is what people respect, even if they don't admit it. Here is the mindset shift you need. You don't respond to defend your reputation. You respond to establish your boundaries. You respond to set the tone. You respond to show what you will and will not tolerate. That is the purpose of your words. Because your goal is not to win an argument. Your goal is to protect your peace. So when someone brings up your past, the worst response is emotional debate. The best response is calm certainty. That's why one of the most powerful GS you can say is this: yes, that was me, and I outgrew that version. Notice what that does. It doesn't deny the past. It doesn't fight the accusation. It doesn't give them an opening. It doesn't invite a back and forth. It simply states a fact and closes the door. And psychologically, that destroys their strategy, because their strategy depends on your emotional discomfort. Their strategy depends on you trying to escape the shame. But when you calmly acknowledge it, you remove the shame. And when the shame is gone, the weapon is gone. You have to realize most attacks only work when you run from them. When you stop running, the attacker becomes powerless. That's why calm confidence is so dangerous to manipulative people. Manipulative people are experts at reading emotional reactions. They look for tension in your face. They look for a change in your voice. They look for anger, embarrassment, fear, guilt. They look for signs that they hit something sensitive, and when they find it, they push harder. But if your response is calm, they don't know what to do. They can't escalate because you won't rise with them. They can't humiliate you because you won't react. They can't corner you because you refuse to argue. So they lose, not because you insulted them, not because you embarrassed them, but because you refuse to play their game. That's the power of emotional discipline. Now let's go even deeper. Calm responses are not just about what you say. They are about what you communicate beneath the words. Because beneath your words, you are sending a message. And the message is, I am not controlled by your opinion. That is a very high-level form of confidence. Most people are controlled by other people's opinions, and they don't even realize it. They change their tone to be liked. They change their behavior to avoid judgment. They change their decisions to avoid criticism. They shrink themselves to avoid conflict. They apologize for existing. They over-explain everything. They try to be understood by people who are not interested in understanding them. And that's why they stay anxious. Because when your peace depends on someone else's approval, you will never have peace. So in that moment, when someone uses your past against you, you have to see it for what it is. It is not a conversation. It is a test. It is a test of your emotional control. It is a test of your self-respect. It is a test of whether you still live in your past or whether you have moved beyond it. And your response determines everything. If you react emotionally, you tell them your past still owns you. If you stay calm, you tell them your past taught you. That's the difference. Now, here's what a lot of people don't understand. Staying calm is not about being passive. Calmness is not weakness. Calmness is the strongest form of strength because it takes discipline. Anyone can shout, anyone can get angry, anyone can argue, but not everyone can stay composed while being provoked. That is emotional mastery, and emotional mastery is what separates leaders from followers. Leaders don't react to insults. Leaders don't get dragged into emotional chaos. Leaders don't get baited into defending themselves to people who don't matter. Leaders stay centered, because when you stay centered, you stay in control, and control is not about dominating others. Control is about controlling yourself. So when someone brings up your past, you pause, you breathe. You don't rush to speak. You don't rush to prove anything. You let the silence sit there for a second. And that silence is powerful because it shows you are thinking. It shows you are not shaken. It shows you are not afraid. Then you respond with clarity. You say something like, yes, that happened, and I learned from it. Or you say, that's not who I am anymore. Or you say, if you're still living in my past, you're behind. And then you stop. You don't keep talking, because the strongest people do not speak to fill space. They speak to create impact. And here is the real secret. The more calm you become, the more dangerous you become. Because a calm person is not easily manipulated. A calm person is not easily controlled. A calm person is not easily baited. A calm person sees through games. And when you become that person, you stop living as a reaction to others. You start living as a decision. So if someone uses your past against you, remember this. You do not need to defend yourself to someone who is using your story as ammunition. You do not need to argue with someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. You do not need to prove your growth to someone who is committed to keeping you small. Your calmness is the proof. Your silence is the proof. Your composure is the proof. And your progress will speak louder than any explanation ever could. Because the truth is, you don't win by convincing them. You win by refusing to be shaken. And that is the highest form of strength. So here's the line to remember. When someone tries to drag you into your past, do not argue. Don't defend. Don't explain. Just stay calm, look them in the eye, and say what is true. Yes, that was me. And I outgrew that version, then walk away. Because the moment you stop reacting is the moment you start leading. At some point, you have to stop pretending that everyone deserves access to you. That might be one of the hardest lessons for people to accept because we grow up believing that loyalty means tolerating anything. We grow up thinking that if someone has been in our life for a long time, they automatically deserve a permanent seat at our table. But time does not equal trust. History does not equal respect. Familiarity does not equal loyalty. And when someone keeps using your past against you, what they are really telling you is this: they are not interested in your growth. They are interested in your weakness. They are not invested in your future. They are invested in your guilt. That should change how you see them, because a person who truly wants the best for you does not keep you trapped in who you used to be. They don't constantly remind you of your lowest moments. They don't treat your mistakes like your identity. They don't bring up old stories every time you start moving forward. They don't throw your past in your face when you're trying to build something better. A person who truly respects you will acknowledge your growth even if they don't fully understand it. They will say, "I see you changing." They will say, "You're not the same person anymore." They may not always agree with your decisions, but they will respect the fact that you are evolving. They will not use your history as a weapon, because mature people don't niche transformation. Immature people do. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Some people don't want you to heal. They don't want you to mature. They don't want you to gain confidence. Because the moment you heal, you stop accepting what you used to accept. The moment you mature, you stop arguing like you used to argue. The moment you gain confidence, you stop tolerating disrespect. And the moment you stop tolerating disrespect, certain people lose their influence over you. So they resist your growth, not openly, but subtly. They'll say things like, "You've changed," and they won't mean it as a compliment. They'll say, "You're acting different," and what they really mean is, "You're not as easy to control anymore." They'll say, "You think you're better than everyone," but what they really mean is, "You're finally acting like you have self-worth." They'll say, "You're being distant," but what they really mean is, "You're not giving me access like you used to." And if they can't shame you into returning to your old self, they will try to remind you of your past, so you start doubting your right to set boundaries. That's what this is always about. Boundaries. When someone keeps bringing up your past, they are not trying to keep the truth alive. They are trying to keep the power dynamic alive. They are trying to keep you in a position where you feel like you have to earn respect, like you have to prove you deserve love, like you have to constantly apologize for existing. And that is not a relationship. That is emotional control. So the question becomes, what do you do about it? You stop negotiating with someone who only values you when you're small. Because some people don't actually want a healthy relationship with you. They want a version of you that they can predict, a version of you that they can manipulate, a version of you that will always take the blame, a version of you that will always accept their disrespect because you feel like you owe them. But you don't owe anyone access to your life if they keep trying to drag you backwards. This is why it's so important to understand the difference between accountability and punishment. Accountability is healthy. Accountability is when someone helps you take responsibility so you can grow. Punishment is when someone keeps bringing up your past to keep you under their control. Accountability leads to healing. Punishment leads to shame. Accountability builds trust. Punishment destroys confidence. And if someone keeps punishing you for things you've already grown from, you need to realize they are not holding you accountable. They are holding you hostage, and no one should have that kind of power over you. Here's what happens in real life. People tolerate this behavior for too long because they think, maybe if I explain more, they'll understand. Or they think, maybe if I prove myself, they'll finally respect me. Or they think, maybe if I stay calm long enough, they'll stop. But the truth is, some people don't stop. They don't stop because they don't want to stop. Because your shame is their advantage. Your guilt is their leverage. Your emotional pain is their control. And once you accept that, you stop hoping they'll change. You start changing your response. And that response is distance. Sometimes emotional distance. Sometimes physical distance. Times permanent distance. Because there is a level of disrespect that should not be debated. It should be removed. This is why boundaries are not just about self-respect. Boundaries are about survival. Boundaries are about protecting your future. Boundaries are about protecting the version of you that is trying to be better. And if someone constantly drags your past into your present, they are interfering with your future, and you cannot build a future with someone who keeps living in your past. It's impossible. Because growth requires space, healing requires safety, becoming a better person requires an environment where you are not constantly attacked for who you used to be. If every time you improve, someone tries to shame you, then you are not in a relationship. You're in a battlefield. And a battlefield is not a place where you can evolve. So you have to decide something. Are you going to keep trying to convince someone who benefits from misunderstanding you? Or are you going to accept the truth that some people will never respect you, no matter how much you improve, because they don't want you to improve? That is the hardest truth, because it forces you to accept something painful. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones most threatened by your growth. Sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones who secretly prefer you broken, because a broken version of you makes them feel needed. But a healed version of you makes them feel irrelevant. And rather than becoming better themselves, they try to pull you down. So what do? You stop giving them access, not out of hatred, not out of revenge, but out of wisdom, because your futu deserves protection. Your peace deserves protection. Your confidence deserves protection. And here's the key. Cutting access does not always mean cutting the person off completely. Sometimes it means you stop sharing personal details. Sometimes it means you stop responding to every message. Sometimes it means you stop explaining yourself. Sometimes it means you stop arguing. Sometimes it means you stop attending environments where you know you'll be disrespected. But in every case, the principle is the same. You don't keep giving your energy to someone who uses it to harm you. And if someone brings up your past every time you set a boundary, then that is your sign. That is the clearest sign you will ever get. That person does not respect your evolution. They do not respect your growth. They do not respect your healing. And if they don't respect your healing, they are not safe for your future. Because people who love you don't try to keep you ashamed. People who love you don't try to keep you small. People who love you don't keep reopening wounds. You worked hard to heal, they help you close them. So the next time someone tries to shame you with your past, remember this. They are showing you how they see you, and you should believe them, not because their opinion is true, but because their behavior is honest. And if their behavior is consistently disrespectful, you don't need to keep negotiating your dignity. You simply draw the line, and you say calmly and clearly, if my past is all you can talk about, then you have no future in my life. Because that is not arrogance. That is self-respect. That is maturity. That is a person finally choosing peace over chaos. And if you can learn to do that, you will stop wasting your life trying to earn respect from people who only feel powerful when you feel ashamed. So here's the truth to reflect on. If someone keeps bringing up your past, they are not trying to understand you. They are trying to control you. And the moment you remove their access, you take back your power.